Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Adam York, CEO at Equips. We are really happy to have everyone here today. We're going to talk about 3 ways to show you how to support your frontline team.
I want to introduce our panelists. We have today just an outstanding collection of executives with a really strong background in management and working with teams. Janelle Davis has been with Equips for quite a while now, haven't you, Janelle? And has played a number of different important leadership roles, really strong background in management. And before she came to Equips, has a really strong background in financial institutions. And then Kara Guzzi is someone who's been with us for a couple of years now, I think, Kara, right? And is now a senior accounts advisor for us. But before that, spent many years as an executive inside of a credit union and has a really strong background in many, many roles within that credit union, and also has a background in technology. And then Denise Cox is with us. Hi, Denise. And Denise has played a number of different roles in this industry, in banking for about 15 years, and then also worked with a service provider in the banking space for that time too. So we're really lucky to have them with us. They're all part of the Equips team now, but bring all the experience of their management background. And I'm Adam York. I'm the CEO and founder of Equips. Equips is a software company that focuses on equipment management. So maybe you're wondering, why are we talking about something like branch management and fulfilling work? And the reason for that is because our core passion as a company is really finding best work. And so part of that is adding people to our team who care deeply about that topic. And we study this all the time. So we're going to share with you what we learned. And we have 3 different topics, and we have different resources inside each of those topics. So as we think about the branch, we think about where you really make things happen for everyone that you serve. For anyone who comes into your branch, the experience that they have there is usually what defines how they feel about you as an organization. And so many things go into that, but by far the biggest thing that goes into that is the experience that they have working with your frontline branch staff. And so when we think about branch management and what it really means, there's a lot of different aspects. At the heart of it is people, 100%, especially the people that are there that are actually hands-on and working with everyone that they serve. That's why we're focusing on these 3 really important topics: finding fulfilling work, fostering continuous learning, and open communication. And the reason we started with fulfilling work is because in this time of change, we've had so much change in the last couple of years. One of the major things that we hear across the board in every industry, but especially in the financial industry, is this desire of workers to have work that means something more than a paycheck. So that's why we're going to start there. So I'm going to start then with point number 1, which is fulfilling work. And the context of this is the world that we're in right now. And I don't have to tell you about this in your personal level, because I'm sure you're dealing with this with your team right now. Less than half of workers say that they're satisfied or extremely satisfied with their jobs. And so that's concerning. That's part of the trend that we're seeing, and addressing this is going to be really important. A large percentage believe that they're at a dead end and can't make progress. And we have almost a fourth that are really eager to make a change. So this is the context in which we are all attempting to manage people. And going to this topic of fulfilling work is really important. When we think about fulfilling work, we think about 4 incredibly important elements that make a really big difference. And these are things that are beyond the job description. And they're the things that are hopefully the basis of a conversation with people on your team. So the first thing comes to the work that people are generally good at, come naturally, they enjoy, and is productive. And this is a great topic to have with anyone that you work with, to just have step back from time to time and have that conversation about what they're great at, what comes naturally. And what we have found in this process is that often what comes naturally to people, they almost don't even consider to be work. If they're great at talking with people, they don't even consider that to be work. It just happens. But it could be something that is really useful for you. And so having them aware of it and you aware of it is really good. So the first really important element of fulfilling work, and a great basis of a conversation, is this area of things that you're good at, come naturally, you enjoy, and add to productivity. The next element that is just absolutely critical is trust within the team. And this can be demonstrated in a lot of different ways. What we've seen is that as more teams have had to have part of their team or maybe all of their team go remote, trust has to be addressed in a totally different way and in a much more intentional way. Think basic things like small trust exercises to larger things like intentional time away as a team become critical to make sure that you have those involved. And then working with a leader that you respect, and that comes back on us to make sure that we're keeping our commitments, making sure that we are following through on what we say we're going to deliver. And then the fourth one is working toward a cause that they believe in. And I think that this is a really big one for us in the financial institution industry because we have this opportunity to have a cause that is very, very compelling. And it can be sometimes may not feel like it's your direct responsibility to communicate that cause, but the more that you communicate that cause to them and tie what they're doing day in and day out to that cause, it actually goes right back to that first point of productivity and really being in that natural work zone. And so if any of those 4 points are off, you're probably going to have an employee that is not as fulfilled and is not really in that zone. So a great place to start with fulfilling work is just a really basic conversation and a way to actually survey your team or sit down and have some dialogue about each of these topics to see where they're at, to see where you're at. So let's say you have someone who's really in that zone. Let's say you have an employee that kind of is doing the work that is great. They're on a great team, but for whatever reason, every time that you go to try to get them to do something, they just seem to not get very engaged. One of the most helpful tools that we found is this motivation matrix, because what we've learned is that people are very differently motivated depending on what their personality is. And so on this side, we have this motivated by concept and then motivated for across the top. And in the motivated by, we have authority, emotion, logic, all very, very different motivations. And then motivated for either achievement, appreciation, or responsibility. And so if you take someone who's really motivated just simply by the power of authority, they're often kind of the good soldier type. They want to know that it came from a credible source. In this example, the CEO needs this done by Friday. So referencing an authority figure or maybe your own authority to ask them to get something done and a really clear sense of achievement, get it done by Friday, is all that they need, and that will totally motivate them. But if you have someone completely on the other end of the spectrum, they're logic driven. They need to understand, and they also are motivated for responsibility. So in other words, if they get the task done by Friday, they have the opportunity to lead the next working group. That can be deeply motivating for this person and totally demotivating for the person over here who may not want more responsibility. The area that we've seen kind of the most disconnect is that many of us as managers are motivated by responsibility. And so offering someone a promotion or more responsibility if they do work really well is exciting to us, but it may actually be demotivating to members of your team. This tool has been extremely helpful for just everyday things, but is especially helpful when having a career discussion to think about what actually gets them going and what would they want as an outcome, more responsibility or just maybe appreciation. And this middle box right here, emotion and appreciation, is to me one of the easiest motivation languages to speak. It's just simply be very excited about what needs to be achieved and then show public appreciation in a really thoughtful way. And again, if you're over here on the logic and responsibility, that may seem ridiculous to you. But for many people, this really fuels them up. So taking a moment to use this motivation matrix, kind of almost like putting stickers for your team members on where they fall, can be really, really eye-opening, because maybe everything else we just showed on the previous slide lines up really well and they're in the place that they should be. But it may literally be that you are unintentionally, or we as we talk to them, are unintentionally demotivating them by speaking the wrong language of motivation. So this comes from a tool, Mastering Communication at Work. We found it to be really helpful in finding fulfilling work. The next thing that you can consider in fulfilling work area is the concept of a stay interview. We talked about kind of making sure that those 4 elements of healthy work are there, that you're speaking to motivate. But then let's say you have a member of your team who's really motivated. What we've seen is that during the interview process, there's a certain amount of energy that happens. There's conversations, there's hopes and dreams. They kind of put their best foot forward. You are advertising kind of like the best outcome that they could have in the role. And so that is a great way to start employment. But sometimes over time, after 30, 60, 90 days, 6 months, maybe some of that energy bogs down a little bit. So what we encourage is this concept of doing a stay interview, where you ask questions as though you're asking them to be part of the team all over again. It allows them to really step back and look at the role objectively and think to themselves, is this the role that I really want to keep doing? So these examples go to, these example questions go to things that they may want to change about the job or the organization. Maybe things that they wouldn't normally ask, or things that they want to start doing, stop doing, or learn to do. It doesn't mean that if they want to stop doing some portion of their job, they have to, stop. You don't have to initially take that reaction to it, but it could be really helpful to know that there's a portion of their work they don't love doing. It doesn't fall in that natural work zone. And that's just a great way to help them migrate forward. And then this one right here, this third question: to what extent do you feel your suggestions and opinions are welcomed? Is really eye-opening. And sometimes this almost works better in a skip interview where like a manager's manager has that question asked. Because if people feel free to be able to communicate about what's going on, you're going to have a much less likelihood of turnover because they feel like they're at least heard. And then this last one, the fourth one's kind of a hard one to ask. It takes guts as a manager, but it's a great one to ask, which is, what would tempt you to leave? And it's really surprising the answers that you will get to this question, because sometimes it's incredibly basic. We may immediately think it's something about pay, when in their mind, it may have everything to do with their schedule, or may have something to do with the tasks that they have involved, or maybe new things that they want to learn to do, new opportunities they'd like that you can actually offer them if you knew about it. So using a stay interview as a tool for fulfilling work is a really great option. So Kara has a story on this topic, and we're going to let her share that.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly share a story with everyone in regards to a situation I had at the credit union I was at. So as Adam alluded to, I have been with Equips now for 2 years. And prior to that, I was at a local credit union for 14 years in different positions. The last position I held was Director of Technology and Operations. And at one point in time, I was looking for some support staff, somebody that could help me with the day-to-day operations. And it was a very difficult task to find someone at the time to be able to join me in regards to being able to help with the IT field, as well as working with our employees and our membership base. And what we would do when a new employee would start is we would have that employee go to different departments and learn about the different positions. So they really got familiar in the onboarding process with everything that we did at the credit union and who they could associate to those different positions. So I had a new employee step into my office one day, and we were having our meeting, and it was about the fourth day that after she had started. And she came into the credit union in the position of a new accounts representative. She had 10 years prior banking experience, and so she was a really great fit for the credit union. We were super excited to have her on board. Well, while we were having our conversation, I had made mention that I was looking for someone to be able to help support technology, as well as, again, working with our staff and membership. And this individual had made note to me, oh, I did this at my previous job. So we had a little bit further discussion and come to find out that this individual had the skill sets that I was actually looking for that position. So I had like 10 interviews prior to, and none of them worked out. And here's this person sitting in front of me. Well, I couldn't just grab her and snatch her up for myself. So of course I went to the manager that hired her and explained the situation. We had a conversation with this new hire and found out that she was actually super excited to get into the technology field. And this was the way for her to break through. So we went through the process of making sure that this is exactly what she wanted. She was super excited. We came up with a great game plan. I did feel bad for our member services manager who had to find a new employee, a new account representative. Yet at the same time, we found that special person that we needed. So we got them in the right position within the organization. So not only was it great for us as a credit union, but also for this individual. It really brought her into her niche where she really wanted to be. And she has grown tremendously in that position. She jumped right in, started learning a bunch of different things. And it was just great all around for both the organization as well as for herself.
All right, that's helpful. Thank you. Going into the next topic, which is continuous learning. And this really starts at a culture level. So what we're going to do is just consider basically 4 tests that you can do for yourself, for your culture, to see if you have a culture that welcomes continuous learning. It's one thing to have a plaque on the wall or to have a motto or to have a training program. That is not the same as having a culture that is all about that. So in the first topic, it's all about curiosity. And this goes to kind of like that conversation that Kara was just talking about, where topics outside of someone's job description come up, and that's welcomed. It's welcomed to learn about different areas inside the organization. It's encouraged. Here at Equips, we strongly encourage that we give people the opportunity to write their own job descriptions based on things that they're strong at. This is totally different than the stay in your area, stay in your kind of designation. Inside of our technology team, we have engineers that are front end and back end. We encourage them to do tasks on both sides because it helps make them a broader, gives them a broader tool set. And then how do you treat mistakes? And there may be, again, like a disconnect between what's said and what actually happens. Are mistakes a learning opportunity? And one of the things that is my motto here at Equips is I don't take you seriously as a leader until you've made a 5-figure mistake. And I actually mean that, because that means that you're actually taking some risks, you're trying some things. And if you can learn from that and grow from it, you're just going to be a stronger manager. I'm sure we have all made serious mistakes. Often we lead by having to take some risks, and you're going to make some wrong judgment calls. They may not turn out right, but if you can recover from that, it's really great. Or is it a penalty-driven mindset? And then probably the third one is a really big deal. Knowledge should be valued in your culture. And this is a good one to just as a gut check as your culture, a learning culture, because anyone with knowledge should be able to teach, whether they're the brand new employee that just happens to have some background on something, or whether they're long tenured and have kind of experience in how the organization is run, or is it only the boss? And this, as managers, we should probably make sure that we're checking with ourselves to make sure that we're not the answer machine, that we're willing to let anyone with knowledge speak. And then the fourth point has to do with what is your culture of peers? Do you drive each other on? Do you help each other get stronger? Is there informal mentoring, or is it viewed as competitive or as a threat?
Adam, this is something that has been very helpful to me personally. It's having, what I've done is it's having a power partner that holds you accountable, that person that could be in the company or outside. For me, that person is outside the company. It should be someone that you don't report to in your immediate department. Think about that person that you know that has the ability to really push you outside your comfort zone. And when you say something isn't working and why, they challenge it in you. I found this very helpful in my continuous learning and growth.
And what's neat about that, Denise, is it kind of gives that example of that's your culture of learning, that you actually want to be challenged. And we can encourage members of our team to do the same thing. Find people inside their organization that are going to drive them to be better, maybe in different teams. Yeah. Or I love your example of outside the organization. Find someone else who kind of is someone you respect and are maybe a little bit afraid of when they ask you those questions. Have you accomplished your goals that you wanted?
Absolutely. It just gives you that different insight or different perspective. You know, so many times you have your thoughts about something, and it's getting that person just to kind of push you and say, hey, did you ever think about it this way? Or this is what's been successful for me. It's really finding that person.
Right. So as we think about kind of the branch environment, does your branch environment really encourage each of these? And that'll give you an insight into the culture. And if not, that's okay. That means it's an area for you to work and provide some leadership. Our next point is kind of like understanding the ROI. And I think sometimes when things are a little bit tight, we're not quite sure if it's worth it. But what I'd like to encourage you to think about is the fact that where people are in a, feel like they're in a learning zone of their career, they stay. If they feel like they have stopped learning, they tend to want to leave. This doesn't have to be dramatic college level learning, but it does need to be some of these points right here. Learning to be most effective is personalized. And what we've seen and certainly have heard is that people learn very differently. Some through webinars like this, some need to read a book, some it's very hands-on. So as a manager, if you take the ownership of that and you try to figure out how people will learn, and it doesn't really need to be huge. It could be sharing an article from time to time, but if they feel like you're invested in them developing and growing, so much higher retention results from that, even in small ways. And then tying it to some kind of a larger goal for them. Do you know the career goals of the people that you're working with? They may be very modest goals. They may not be huge. They may be career goals that are tied to personal goals that they have. But have you had those conversations? Are you comfortable doing that? Because then people on your team view you as a resource and view you as a partner in their learning. And then the other tool that we like to use is this concept from the book Lean Startup that talks a lot about doing validated learning. And so our whole company did this, where every employee took on a problem. They wrote out what their assumptions were. They wrote out who the problem was being experienced by, what exactly the problem was, what they thought could maybe make it go better, and then quickly did a test. And it was incredible to see. We developed a Teams channel inside of our organization where everyone could share their kind of written format of this and very quickly go after any problem that they found interesting inside the organization. And so much creativity went around this. I highly encourage you to do this. If you have people that are on your team that are unhappy about how something is going, you can give them this format and you can say, okay, what are you assuming about this problem? And who is really experiencing it? What exactly is going wrong? What do you think would make it better? And then how can you test it? And try as much as possible to keep things within their control. If they're trying to solve it by pulling other people in as a resource, that's not going to be as effective. But what can they actually do? And then give it a time frame. Try something out for a short period of time. Look at the results and see what happens. This is what we do all the time when building software, but we've seen this work in so many different areas of the company to be able to run a quick experiment. And often it turns what is a problem into a learning opportunity. So we're going to share this as part of the presentation so that you can see this format, but we found it to be extremely helpful in continuous learning. And Denise, you actually have an example on that.
Yeah, so outside the traditional methods of learning that you just discussed, this is one that definitely takes, I would say, more of an organizational shift, but the results provide a fresh look, I think, across all departments, and truly believe it has given this FI a competitive advantage in our industry. I'll just take you at a high level overview. One of our clients requires all their VPs, officers, and managers to rotate departments every 3 years. So as you can imagine, this wouldn't be easy, or definitely would push many outside their comfort zone. You finally get your stride in your position and you're moving on. One of the employees that I've had the pleasure to work with at this FI, it's been 15 years. She's been in card services, lending, ATMs, and security and fraud. She's now the president at this financial, and she's often said, hey, it's not easy, Denise. You know, sometimes I'm commuting an hour, I'm getting into something I know nothing about. But she says the growth, both personally and for the company, has been really unparalleled with challenging the status quo. And I think that's where we always get stuck in, you know, that common response, this is how we do it, or we've always done it. So just a good example of, again, kind of just pushing that status quo and developing the employees within your organization.
We're going to go a little bit more quickly on this last one. Open communication is incredibly important for things that happen inside of the branch. And one of the tools that we love to reference is this tool of radical candor. There's an amazing TED talk given on this in the follow-up materials. We're going to give you a link to that because it is absolutely worth watching. But it goes on this kind of to the zone that many of us as managers avoid, which is challenging directly while caring personally. And I don't know if you're like me, I live in the ruinous empathy area of management where I care really, really deeply about the people who report, but I'm not always willing to challenge directly because I don't realize that those two can go really closely together. So just thinking about your culture, thinking about how you're communicating and putting yourself on this graph And one thing that I did is I actually printed this chart, not with the extra little words here, but the center chart, and put it on my desk, and people could put stickers based on feedback I had given them on where I fell. And I wish I could say they all fell here, but they didn't. There were stickers on all areas of this. But it was a way for me to get feedback on how do I actually come across? Am I challenging? Do I care? Does it come across that I care personally? And that really helps with open communication, for sure. Another thing is to think clearly about how you're communicating. So clarity is incredibly important. And this is something that we probably all know, but need to be reminded of. And so a format that I've really found helpful is this concept of getting really specific behavior. Like, I noticed that you're not arriving at 8:30 when you're supposed to be here. The impact of that is the rest of the team has to get things set up, and so they don't have as many people there. What I expect you to do instead is to be here and ready to go at 8:30. That's a really clear example because it has to do with attendance, but you can use this in other areas. And I think one of the keys for me has been being really clear about the specific behavior, not being just general, but citing very clear specific behavior. How it impacts others is really useful because it brings it home to them. It's not just about you being the boss, it's about really what that means, and then making the expectation clear. For most employees, this is plenty. If you just get used to this format and do it really well, they're going to know exactly where you stand, and you're going to be on the radical candor part of the spectrum. Some people need more than that. You've got to tell them how you're going to keep them accountable going forward, and maybe even the consequence. If you've already told them these things before, you probably need to add these as well. And so this really simple little format, communicating, can help you stay in the radical candor zone and as a way for you to prepare to have that conversation.
So, as Adam mentioned earlier, I've been with Eclipse now 8 years. So we've gone through a few different rotations of different strategies that we use for communication. And I found radical candor to be really, I honestly like that one a lot. And the open communication, it really helps with a lot of confusion. I've actually applied a lot of these to my personal life as well. And just understanding that maybe what you're saying isn't as clear to the person who's receiving it. So being really specific, I think, is really helpful. And the other thing is really staying open as a manager to your staff and letting them feel comfortable coming to talk to you about maybe challenges that they're having, whether it be with a peer or even with you personally. Speaking of, being able to keep staff, knowing that it's kind of a turbulent environment that we're in right now, it is a lot of that for me has been the ability to have open communication at every level in our company. It's been really nice to know that that exists and that they really believe in it and they follow through with it. So not a specific story per se to a customer that I work with, but just wanted to say that we do, this is something that we really believe in at Eclipse, and I feel like it's been really helpful and critical for our company and our growth. It helps you to know that you have the right people in the right roles. And, if they aren't hitting what they need to be hitting, you're very clear with them on that. And then maybe you find a new path for them. But otherwise, yeah, for me, it's just been great having the open door policy. But again, it's being very specific and not really finger pointing. It's really about it's trying to be honest with them to make sure that it is something that you're looking for their benefit. It's not just a complaint time, not just to say things you don't like about somebody, but things that you want to do to help them improve. So I really encourage you to, we're going to be sending along a video about this after. I encourage you to watch that.
So those were the major points. Just want to recap real quickly what we talked about. Really having 2022 be an incredible year inside your branches, making sure that everyone who's there feels like they're there for a much bigger purpose and that you're communicating with them in a way that motivates them and that you're helping them fulfill their goals as well. Making sure your culture is all about learning and that's really clear. It's not just something you say, but that you live. And then that the communication flows really well. I know that we want that, but it really takes work. And some of these tools help us remember that, especially in these times where they're having to communicate a lot of different directions. Communicate with people coming into the branch, communicate with team members, with managers. And so that's a really, really big deal. So we're going to share some of these tools. So hopefully there's things that you can take with you. And then before we have just a slide or two that Denise is going to give us like the 120-second footage clips and why are we talking about this.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot over the last 30 to 40 minutes on really finding how to ensure your employees are spending the majority of their time doing their best work. But how does this relate to Equips? Like Adam said, we're not an HR company. I know he touched on it in the beginning, but it's really simple. Our focus is ensuring whenever a piece of equipment fails within one of your branches, your staff has that one place, one process to be able to manage that call and easily communicate to all necessary parties, from the vendor to management. What we have found is that 89% of your frontline employees, such as your tellers, are impacted or pulled away from their best work when a piece of equipment fails within the branch. So take a minute and think about your process and how that works today in your branch. Let's say the ATM fails. The first decision comes in play. Is this a piece of equipment that needs to be looked at internally, maybe by IT? IT needs to reset it potentially. Or can I resolve it by removing like a simple cash jam? Or do I need to call the vendor direct? Next, if vendor direct, what vendor has a contract on that ATM? How do I open the call? Do I email? Do I call them? Do I go to their online portal? You see, there's a lot of room for error, delay, and time spent just in opening that initial call. That's not to mention the follow-up or completion. This was the biggest complaint that we found, and we've heard loud and clear from the FIs. When surveyed, 94% said there has to be an easier way to manage all of our equipment and all those vendors within our branches. That's where the Equips web app comes into play. Again, one place, one process with automated workflows, whether it's internal approval or action needed or straight to that vendor. We really appreciate you guys spending the time with us today, and I hope you have found some of these tips and tricks that we've shared that makes Equip successful.
Thank you everyone so much for being here. It's a privilege to be on this call with so many outstanding managers across the country. We love each of you. Thank you for being here and being part of it. And you have our contact information, and we have follow-up that we'll send as well. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.